Hey girls, welcome back to the Asterisk podcast where I'm your host, April Biondolillo. And today on the show, we have a very special guest. Her name is Brittany. Brittany is the weekend experience pastor at Timberlake Church, as well as a writer and speaker passionate about faith, healing, and transformation. She lives in Redmond, Washington with her husband, Dustin, and their 1-year-old daughter, Remington. I love that name. Through her journey with trauma, fertility struggles, motherhood, and mental health, she shares honest and relatable stories to remind others that they are not alone. Amen. That's so good. I'm like reading that bio. I'm like, Brittany, let's go. It's so good. Thanks for being on the show today, Brittany.
I'm so excited. I can't wait to see what we're going to
Yes.
talk about.
I know. So we've been doing, Brittany and I, we got to do what I call a discovery call. And it's really just to hear her story out. I want to make sure that this is a place where we give it the right platform, that we speak to it accurately. And talking with Brittany on the phone, I was like, wow, you have such a story, such an impact. It's going to be an amazing episode. But yeah, we have a lot of things to cover. I'm excited to dive on in with you. So, we're going to start with just kind of learning a little bit more about you, Brittany, and kind of your upbringing. You shared with me you didn't really grow up in the church necessarily. You didn't have that. I've been in the church my whole life. And so I want to dive into just like your beginning story of growing up. You had an atheist dad, a Catholic mom who emphasized a lot of legalism. How did that shape your view of God?
Yeah, well, I would say that there were two very different views, obviously. On
Absolutely.
one hand, I viewed God as very absent and just allowing me to experience trauma that I could have never imagined at the age that I was. And then on
Mm,
the other hand, I viewed God as someone with very high expectations that I could never meet.
wow.
And so I think at times I had to choose between disbelief and earning my way to God's approval. But my journey has just been really full of unlearning
Mm.
legalism and discovering freedom in who Jesus really is.
Yeah, no, it's so hard. I know when you were sharing, like, it's like two very opposite sides of like, okay, but that just allows, I feel like for you now, knowing like what to speak to, like you have a wide range of people that you can, understand, empathize with and speak to. So you kind of have a little bit of a blended family. You had a dad who was absent and a stepdad who battled alcoholism in the beginning. Really cool story in there too. So you can sneak that in if you want. But how did those experiences influence your understanding of family, marriage, and faith?
Yeah. Yeah, I do want to mention my stepdad who did battle with alcoholism is sober, and the
Amazing.
testimony that he has, I hope and pray one day that he shares it with hundreds of people
Yeah.
because it's just amazing. But I've just been able to watch his transformation over the last 10 years,
Mm.
and our relationship's only strengthened, his marriage has only strengthened. And it's just been really cool to watch. But I think having the flip side of two dads, one who was absent and one who did struggle with those things in my childhood, it showed me a lot of instability as a kid, which just gave me a really deep desire at a young age to build something different when I was thinking
Yeah.
about family. And at the same time, I was also very scared of family and marriage and the idea of faith. Like there was a piece of me that was trying to stay away from all of it. And then there was this other side of me that was like, no, I long for something more.
Mm.
Um, and so I do think that in my faith, I've found the perfect father, which is
Wow.
so cool and such a redeeming aspect of my life to have uh, trauma from both of my dads, and they
Yeah.
both know that. But then to have a God who redeems and
Yeah.
gets to be that constant, loving, and never absent father. But those experiences, I just don't think they broke me, but they shaped my commitment into what I want my home to be rooted in, which is in love and faith. And
Yeah.
so my husband and I talk about it a lot and what we want our daughter's life to look like. And the fact that we both work in ministry and the fact that we have both have a different marriage than our parents do too is
Yeah.
just a different redeeming story. But it's just been really cool to see the way that God has made it come full circle and
Yeah.
has made desires happen in my heart from experiences I had as a kid.
Yeah. No, and it's so cool, like, even hearing your story, like, I'm excited for the girls to get to hear more of, like, where you're at today with where you have come from, what you have struggled with. And you are hinting at there was some instability. There was not a lot of encouragement of, yeah, we go to church. This is what we do, you know. So you started growing up.
Mhm.
And when you turned 19, there started to be like a lot more questions that you began to ask yourself about your faith. What sparked that curiosity? What led you to the place of, yeah, I want Jesus to be like Lord and Savior of my life? Because, like we've already heard, it wasn't anything being encouraged, being
Mhm.
encouraged and spoken into your life.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say up until I was 19, it was something I inherited rather than something I owned on my own. The idea of faith and the idea of
Yeah.
God. But then when I was 19, honestly, it was in college. I was surrounded by other people who loved God and had really
Mm,
authentic relationships with Him. But then I also had people in my life at that time who were questioning God or angry with God and were very vocal about those things too. And it just made me start asking, like, is this real? And if it
mm,
is, what does that look like for me? What does my relationship get to be? I think I wrestled between the contrast that of what I had growing up and the idea of God. And it was just a really cool thing to watch unfold through the
yeah.
people that God put in my life at the time. But I do think that curiosity just really sparked from people I was surrounded by. And on
Mm,
both sides of the token, too, like the ones that were really committed to God and the ones that were also afraid of Him, just
mm.
gave me the freedom to ask questions and hear other people's stories that they didn't even know were testimonies at the time.
Wow. Yeah. And from that curiosity, when you're 19, you're kind of like, okay, maybe exploring. Were you going to church? Were you asking questions? Like, what were you doing with that curiosity?
Yeah, yeah. I went to Iowa State University in Ames,
Mm,
Iowa, and there was a little Catholic church in the center of the university, and so I would go there every once in a while. But if you've gone to a Catholic church, you know that there's like a little bit of routine, and
mm,
because I was so unchurched and unfamiliar, I think I felt so out of place.
wow.
Um, but then I also got to take a religion class, and I just got to ask a lot of questions of my professor.
Wow.
And it was just a really cool time to be surrounded by so many different religions, so many
Yeah.
different kinds of Christians. And then I moved to Colorado when I was 20, and that's where I really started going to church. And so there is where I got to have a little bit more of an outlet and a more consistent place to ask those questions. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Let's jump into your time
yeah.
in Colorado. This is like my favorite part of your story, just to say. So, if I remember correctly, it was your brother who was inviting you to church, right?
Yep. Yep. It was.
Okay. So there is a service you go to.
Mhm.
You're 20 at the time, and you'll tell the story better than I will, but just to set you up, there's a moment of like spontaneous baptisms. And before you know it, you're in line, you're going down, not even prepared, ready that this is what's happening. Share with us that moment and what was going on. Was it something that the preacher was saying? Was the Lord already working on your life? Was there stuff previous? You made a big change that day. Tell us more about that moment.
Yeah, I think that particular Sunday that I went, I only really went to church at that time when my youngest brother did ask me to go. It was like the big sister guilt of like, look, your
Love it.
youngest sibling's going, like you have to go.
Yeah.
Um, it's like
Honest. It's
embarrassing to
honest.
tell him no. And
Yeah.
so he had asked me to go that day, and I was like, I don't really want to go. And I'm so obviously glad that I did, and there was a
Yeah.
reason that I felt such heavy conviction to go that particular Sunday. But the lead pastor had been preaching on how Jesus came down to meet us where we are at, so we don't
Mm,
have to fulfill all of these expectations, which I mentioned earlier is something that I struggled with my whole life. Just with, I think, the legalism side of it, of like feeling as though I had to have all these expectations. I had to be the perfect human to be loved by God. And I think a little bit of it too is like when you have, when you have childhood trauma surrounding fathers in particular, I think we can project that sometimes onto our relationship with our
Yeah.
God. And so I think I was feeling a little bit of that as well. When he was preaching, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so healing. Like he's talking about how he's meeting me where I'm at. He's talking about how he's a consistent God,
Mm,
how he's stable. And those are just things that I really wanted in my life. But basically from that, he transitioned into talking about what baptisms were and did a countdown for people. He was like, if you want to be baptized today, I'm going to do a countdown. We have clothes for you. We have a
wow.
towel for you. Like, do not let that interfere because you didn't plan it. Stand up and then we'll get this, essentially we'll get this party started.
Wow. I
And
love it.
I found myself after the countdown standing up and I was shaking.
Wow.
And I can honestly say it was the Holy Spirit that led me
Yeah.
because I was not wearing the proper clothing. I was just as shocked as anyone that hears my testimony.
Mm,
Um, it for sure was not my plan. And it definitely was all of his.
yeah. Okay, so paint a little bit of a picture of where is Brittany at this point in her life of why was this such a big deal? Like, yes, you came with your questions and you were trying to figure it out, but what was the pain? What was the baggage? What was the state of your life where it's like, man, I need something different?
Yeah. Yeah. We talked about this a little bit on the phone, but I'm still working on
Yeah.
accepting the fact that you shouldn't have shame over your story because
Yeah.
God gave you that story.
Amen.
And so as I say this, I get nervous every time I talk about it, but I know it's
Yeah.
for a purpose. I
Yes.
was struggling and was addicted to cocaine.
Yeah.
And I had gotten into the wrong group of friends, always drinking, always going out. My family had no idea how bad it was. And that particular Sunday, I was hungover from the party the night before.
Mm,
And I like that the night before, I just remember thinking to myself, and at the time, seed planted for sure, probably my first memorable prayer was me on the bathroom floor of a frat house being
yeah.
like, God, I just like want to have purpose in my life. I just
Wow.
want there to be more than this for me. Um, and so, yeah, I think that's why it threw everybody off. Everybody that knew me at the time was like, "What? How did you go from frat
Wow.
house to church girl?" Like that was, but
Yeah.
I think it was a really cool moment too, though, because even my friend group at the time, I think, was having a lot of questions about faith, was
Mm,
having a lot of questions about God, and I just felt so adamant, even though I didn't know him, that he can meet us where we're at.
yeah.
Um, and so even though I didn't have that personal relationship with Jesus quite yet, I saw the seeds being planted. I saw the passions coming out. I saw the like passion for him coming out. And the defensiveness too that I didn't ever expect to have as somebody who didn't know him very well.
Yeah.
Uh, but then yeah, I went to church that day and he made me stand up. So
I love that. And it's so powerful because when we talk about baptism, it's like our old self is dying and we are saying, okay, God, here I am publicly declaring like you are Lord of my life. The old is gone, the new has come. And that's literally what was happening in your own story, which
yeah.
is so cool because you don't always know as pastors when you're in those moments, like what is exactly going on in a person's life that's led them to that point. What was it like afterwards, like walking that out? You just had this big transformative moment. What took place next?
Yes, after so I had graduated with my bachelor's degree in pre-law and I was getting ready to go to law school. And after being baptized, I told my parents, I was like, I can't go to law school. I can't pursue law. Yeah, I'm going to stay with the same crowd of people. I'm
Mm,
never going to change. Essentially what you were just saying, like if I'm going to die to my old self, like I can't keep living the life of my
wow.
old self.
Yeah.
And so I gave all of that up. I was offered an internship, and this is my favorite part of the story because we
Yeah.
discussed this, but God said, "Let me humble you really quickly."
Ugh,
Within the first couple weeks of being a Christian, I was offered an internship at this church
mm.
for communications, and I was like, "I have my bachelor's degree. I'm above an intern."
You're like, sorry about it.
Yes, and I really was in
Wow.
denial about it. I was like, "There's no way I'm not gonna do that. I'm not even interested a little bit." And I
Mm,
think, it was just cool to watch how he used that and how he humbled me, like, genuinely,
yeah.
and I know I joke about it, but, like, truly humbled me and made me see that I was supposed to do this and helped me feel
Yeah.
it too. Like I felt deep conviction thinking about saying no. And so I said yes.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad I did because I met my husband there and
Mm,
I found my real calling and I found
yeah.
my next career path. And it really was just a stepping stone into all of these different things that happened in my life later on. But yeah, after my spontaneous baptisms, it was into ministry, which was
Wow.
not my plan.
Yeah, let's talk about that too, because you're what we would call like a young baby Christian, like just
Mhm.
kind of taking these first steps for the first time, never been here before, never explored this, and now you're getting these opportunities. Started off as an internship that then led into full time ministry for you. What was that like jumping from like you're just saying yes to Jesus and then you're full speed ahead now in ministry?
Yeah. It definitely was overwhelming and very exciting. So, as much as we talk about like first time Christians and new Christians and this fire for Jesus that they have, I was so passionate. I had
Yeah.
this long desire to want to know him more, to love him, to fall in love
Mm,
with him, and that was really exciting. But at the same time, it felt like I had to learn in real time, growing in my faith while helping others do the same thing.
yeah.
And so it taught me that ministry is not about having all of the answers, and
Yeah.
it's about pointing people to Jesus who
Mm,
does have all the answers. And I think that was just a really hard concept for me. I
yeah.
struggled a lot in ministry at first. And I think at the same time, it's obviously part of my story and it's the reason I do what I do, but it was really difficult jumping
Yeah.
headfirst into
Yeah.
the deep end with people who were not only going through the same experiences as me, but expecting more of me because
Yeah.
of the position I was in.
Yeah. Mm. That would be like so challenging. Yet I see so much fruit that can come from that because
Mhm.
you didn't get to just have the opportunity of having this big transformative moment and then
Mhm.
just remaining kind of like faceless in the crowd. You know, that's not that that's how it's always can be, but I think a lot of times like we can go through the motions and you
Yeah.
got like a discipleship opportunity of like, hey, we're going to throw you in and you're going to really be challenged and you're going to learn a lot of things. And that's it probably produced so much growth inside of you. But yeah, also wrestling with like navigating how do I do this? This is so new for me. So, what unique challenges and advantages did you experience in learning about Jesus while also leading others?
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest challenges I had was feeling like I needed to have it all together
Mm,
while still figuring it out.
yeah.
Um, I struggled with doubts and questions and moments of feeling unqualified. And I actually think because that was the root of where I started in ministry, I still think that's where the enemy fights me
Mm,
in my job today,
yeah.
is feeling those same things. Like I find myself leaving a meeting and I'll feel triggered and I have to remind myself like, no, this is what God's called you to. This is how
Yeah.
God is using you. This is how you're being a steward. Like, just keep going with it. But I definitely struggled with it then, and I still struggle with it now. Of
Yeah.
like feeling underqualified, feeling like I don't deserve where I am, feeling like I'm not the smartest in the room. Like I didn't go to seminary to get where I am.
Mm,
I took this pathway and followed him and followed his calling. And um, I know we joke and we say that it's in the Bible. It's a joke, but it's like true that
yeah.
he qualifies the unqualified. Like he
Yeah.
is the one that gives us the answers.
Yeah.
And so but it is very different feeling it. Like
Yeah.
I'd read stories where he did it and I'd be like, look, like they're like me. But then it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I didn't want it to be me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I think there was a huge advantage. Learning about Jesus while leading others definitely kept me depending on him.
Yeah.
Uh, I couldn't rely on my own knowledge or experience because I didn't have it. And I think there was this deep sense of empathy for those who were new to their faith because
Mm,
I was right there with them. So
yeah.
it was a lot easier for me to hear people's stories and not judge them. It was a lot easier for me to sit and pray with somebody who maybe felt really raw.
Mm,
And honestly, those are the people that are really easy for me to love, are
yeah.
that are unexpected.
Mm,
Just because I remember coming in that way and I remember
yeah.
feeling judged and I remember feeling scared and I remember feeling like I didn't deserve him. And so,
Mm,
um, yeah, I think there was a lot of things that I struggled with for challenges, but there was a lot of good that came out of it. And
Yeah.
now it's helped shape my faith, and it's helped shape who I am as a leader, and just who I am in general too. Yeah.
That's so good. I love just that you got to walk alongside people really in that same place of me too, figuring it out. And sometimes, even for me, like growing up in the church and being a part of it for so long, you do start to kind of have like this righteousness about you of being better than other people. I've been doing this longer, and it's this reminder of like, man, who am I? And we never can learn everything about God. There's still so much more to learn. Like, we're all growing, we're all discovering. And I think that just puts us all in the same playing field, which can be frustrating for some because it's so like, that does not make sense, you know? Like, we should all be like going up this ladder, but really it's like serving the Lord. It's like the opposite. We're just going deeper and deeper and serving other people and becoming lower. And, you know, like greater is he than ourselves, like decrease while he increases. And so it's not our normal understanding or how we would see things like reflected in the world. So I think that's so good that you're hitting at that of just getting to do it alongside people. And that's like one of my favorite quotes too of like God calls the qualified, or God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. I love
Yes,
that.
that's
You're
yes.
like, I know, I was struggling. Like, where is it? Where is it? Yeah. And it's so good. But you, like you said, like when you're the one in it,
Mhm.
it doesn't feel good. It's so
Yeah.
hard. And the enemy's so good of making those lies feel like our own truth.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're not far off, you know? It's like he's saying things, they're like, yeah, actually, I could see it that way. And that makes sense. Yet, but it's
Mhm.
like, do you trust me? Like,
Yeah.
if I've called you, like, that's all you need to know. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
we'll work on that. We got some growth to do, you know? So, how did you ended up stepping away from ministry for a season, and how did that end up deepening your relationship with the Lord?
Yeah, yeah. I took like a 6-month break, and I think it was probably one of the hardest but most transformative experiences in my faith.
Mm,
Probably because of what we were just talking about
yeah.
actually. I went from knowing God because I had this role and I had these responsibilities and I had this expectation, to having to know God without the role and the
Mm,
responsibilities and the expectations. And so I had a huge pill to swallow when it came to admitting and understanding and feeling freedom also at the same time, in the fact that God loved me just as much if I served in ministry
yeah.
as he did if I sat on the couch all day and didn't do anything.
Mm,
And that was really hard for me because I am a workaholic.
yep. Me too, girl. Me too.
I dive headfirst into work. I
Yep.
work all day, all night, especially when I love what I do and I
Yeah.
love ministry. And so I think that was a season that really tried me in terms of like knowing that I was still serving God, even if I wasn't at the church, or knowing I was still
Mm,
serving God, even if worship looked like me being at home.
yeah.
Um, and accepting that worship is in different things. Like
Yeah.
I struggled with a really bad depression in that season, and I remember telling myself like, even if I stay in bed all day, I'm resting, I'm taking care of my body, that is a form of worship and it is okay.
Mm, yeah.
Um and so I went from being in a space where my whole identity and my relationship with Jesus was in the church to having to figure out what that looked like outside of the church.
Yeah.
And I think when I stepped back in the ministry, I was able to do so from a place of being filled by him first rather
Yeah.
than trying to pour out consistently.
Mm,
And so I do see the purpose of that season. And I'm so thankful that that season did happen. But in the middle of that season, I was like, what's my purpose again? I felt all the same feelings I felt before, but
yeah.
this time I had no coping mechanisms either. I wasn't drinking,
Mm,
I wasn't doing cocaine. Like very different lifestyle. And so I
yeah.
think I really just had to become friends with him.
Mm,
And that was really hard for me. And I'm glad it happened when it did, especially because it happened on earlier in my ministry calling than later.
yeah.
Uh, so now I know better, and I know that I do need him, and I know what that looks
Yeah.
like. And
It's so important because we can get so caught up in the doing, and we can be doing all of these amazing things for the Lord. It's like, yeah, Jesus, I'm with you all the time. Like, look at what I'm doing. But yet,
yeah,
do we know him, and do we know how to just be? And I think I struggle a lot with that. Like the classic story of like Mary and Martha. I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, I would not be sitting at Jesus' feet. I would be like cooking and cleaning and
Yeah,
preparing and making sure everything's set and ordered correctly. And so just that importance of like he's inviting us into this place of I just want to be in a relationship with you. Like I want you to
yeah,
know me, to love me, and that may sometimes look like pouring out and doing all these things, but in other seasons, it's just, will you just sit with me? Will you just like be present in that way? And I find those moments to be not my natural response and a little bit more uncomfortable. It feels wrong because I'm like, yeah, but I really like, I'm going to do it, but I got to do something, you know? So I think that's really cool that the Lord took you on that journey to understand that and to know that. Because
yeah.
then you ended up transitioning. You moved from Colorado, moved to Washington,
Yep.
and now you and your husband are stepping into ministry at a different church. What was that like? You're leaving the church where you first met Jesus, and now you're stepping into a new faith community in Washington. How was that for you?
Yeah, I think it was very bittersweet. I think
Yeah.
that's the simplest word I could use. Very bittersweet. I was leaving a place where my faith was formed, where I learned how to follow Jesus, and where I built deep rooted connections.
Yeah.
And my family too. Like this is where my entire family met Jesus. This is where my mom's faith was transformed.
Mm,
This is where my brother's faith was transformed. And I think that was really hard too. But I also think stepping into a new faith community in Washington, it felt so apparent. We visited Washington as like a little mini honeymoon. We are
mm,
a COVID marriage is what I call it. So we
yes.
never really had a honeymoon.
Yeah.
And so we came out here, and Dustin's, my husband, his family is out here. And so we came out here to visit them for 10 days. And I remember looking at him on like day 2. And I was like, we are supposed to come back here. I was like,
Mm,
we need to be in Washington. And when he came home one day from our last church from work, he was like, Brittany, I think it's time. I think it's time to leave. Like, I think I'm
wow.
ready. I think it's time to go to Washington. And I had joked about this on our first call, but if you move from out of state to Washington, it's usually smart to have jobs
Not the
before
cheapest
you.
state to live in, yes.
Yes, yeah. And so we were very fortunate. His parents opened up their home to us for a short season when we first moved
Wow.
here. But within 3 months of us moving here, we got jobs,
Mm,
and that transition was just full of his faithfulness the
yeah.
whole way. We could see the seeds being planted when we came and visited for those 10 days. Then when we followed the lead, like I followed him telling me, like he was like, I'm ready to go. And I was like, I'm ready whenever you are. And
Wow.
we put in our note, he put in his notice, and I was serving at the time. So I told him I couldn't serve anymore.
Yeah.
And we put in our notices, and we were like, it's time to transition and move. It happened so quickly, but the way that God showed up every step of the way, it
Mm,
was just, I just learned that my faith wasn't tied to a specific place or
yeah.
people, but just to Jesus himself. And watching him lead us, I think
Mm,
was probably one of the coolest experiences, especially thinking about all the logistics.
yeah.
I'm a very emotional person, but I do think very logically when it comes to like
Yeah.
moving and like finances, and we didn't
Right.
have jobs and we didn't have a place to live. And so like the way that he showed up and the perfect timing of us getting jobs to being able to get our own apartment and
Yeah.
be here was just such a God thing.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
I think those are such good signs, like, I think for anyone who's struggling with, like, making those decisions or knowing, like, if it's the Lord, a lot of the times, like, the Lord will just line up those things so well, like, he'll
Yeah.
make it abundantly clear for you in that. And not to say that you won't face hardships in moments, but
Mhm.
typically I feel like you'll know and the Lord will just begin to open those doors where you're not having to pound them open or force them
Yeah.
open. And I think that's so important to know. Like Lord is so kind to not
Mhm.
only be someone that goes with you, but he'll go before you in making those preparations. We're going
For
to kind
sure.
of transition a little bit in your
Mhm.
story. This is another, just a disclaimer, it can be a harder topic to speak on. Is you found out, I don't know when you found out, before you got married, that you were going to have
Mhm.
struggles.
Yep.
You found out in your journey that you had early ovarian failure
Mhm.
and you ended up having a miscarriage.
Yep.
How did that shape your understanding of God's goodness? How did you walk through that?
Mhm. Yeah, I found out about my ovaries were both failing, and I found out about that before Dustin and I even started dating.
Wow.
Um, I brought it up on our first date because he was a pastor already, and I was like 2 months into being a Christian, and
Mm,
all I knew about church was they need to reproduce a lot of babies, and so
that's awesome.
on
You're
our
like, hey, I
second
know this is on your trajectory without even knowing you, I know.
It's only funny now
Uh,
because as a pastor, as somebody out of church, like that's a crazy assumption, but that is just a
it's,
stereotype. It's just a
yeah,
stereotype. And so I really came in hot on our first date and I was
that's
like,
amazing.
I can't have kids. It's like
Dustin's
it's,
like, this is the one. This is the one.
that had to be what sold him. I don't know. But he had said though, he was like, I've always felt this really long calling to adopt. And so that was like kind of what we went
Come.
into our marriage with was like thinking
Yeah.
we were going to adopt.
Mm,
And just knowing that from the front. And I think that was a beautiful God thing because I
yeah.
always felt called to be a mom. And so it was
Yeah.
never about me not wanting to be a mom. It was specifically just the diagnosis.
Yeah.
Um, but so that was like in our first date, I was thinking I was putting up walls, and Dustin was like, actually, like, we're good. Like, I'm
Wow.
keeping you still.
Wow.
And so that is like just a different part of our testimony in our marriage. But it came out later on because in our first year of marriage, within actually our first 6 months of being married, we did go through a miscarriage. And that was really hard because there were so many different mixed emotions with it. It
Mm,
was like obviously grieving the loss and the impact it had on my body, but also like the grief of hope that was
yeah.
there of like thinking and seeing that maybe we could have our own baby.
Wow.
Um and so that was really hard. Like that was something that I just wasn't expecting. I think in both experiences, it was the most painful and faith shaking experiences of my life
Mm,
for different reasons. Like the ovarian diagnosis happened a month after I became a Christian. And I was like,
mm,
oh, now this? I was like, this is
wow.
what I signed up for. And then the other part with having a miscarriage, I think, was just so faith shaking because it was affecting my marriage. And I was like,
Yeah.
I just, to me, getting married was like taking up a cross because of what we were talking about earlier. I
Wow.
was so damaged from my childhood thoughts and views of marriage that
Mm,
I had shut down the idea of marriage. And so then to get married and go through this right away, I was like, whoa, now this, like I couldn't
yeah.
fathom what was happening.
Yeah.
And I think in both seasons I felt significant brokenness, yet I got to encounter his presence in a way I never had before. It was probably the first time ever that I got to see that his goodness isn't defined by what I go through, but who he is. And so he met me in my pain. Jesus reminded me that I was not alone, and he showed me that his plans were still good, even if I didn't understand them. And I think that was just that was the beautiful part of it. And I think similar to how like biblical joy doesn't mean always being happy. I think that part of our testimony, like beautiful doesn't always mean good looking. And I think it was just a really beautiful part of our testimony where we got to grow in our marriage, we got to grow in our own faith journey,
Wow.
and we got to grow closer to him together. Was just a really beautiful thing in a broken way. And
Yeah.
that to me is how God uses our brokenness too. So yeah.
Do you feel like from walking through that, it closed doors on wanting to try again out of fear? Or do you feel like it did the opposite of faith was growing and, hey,
Yeah.
we didn't even know this was a possibility? Like you kind of said, it's like this flutter of hope at the same
Mhm.
time. Did it
Yeah,
open the doors? Yeah.
it's funny that you asked that because I've never even thought about it that way, but it definitely thinking about it because we were talking about this the other night too, actually, my
Yeah.
husband and I, because thinking about it, my daughter turns 1 in a week, and so
Mm,
we were just reflecting on the whole journey, and we were talking about how it's crazy because after a miscarriage, we battled with this essentially it was a fight in our marriage.
mm,
Do we step up and try?
Yeah.
or do we shut down because we're scared?
Yeah.
And I think it was a lot of back and forth for a couple of months.
Yeah.
And then we decided to try, and we tried. It took 3 years. So
Wow.
it was a long, long journey. And it was, I think the hardest part was watching other people go through similar things, but have different stories. And obviously
Yeah.
that's all with intention. But when
Yeah.
you're in the middle of it, you're in the middle of infertility, or you're in the middle of a miscarriage, or you're in the middle of struggling, like that's all you do is compare. And I
Mm.
know that it's not a good thing, and that's how the enemy uses us, especially as women, I
Absolutely.
think. But it did happen. Like I'd go to baby
Yeah.
showers and I'd leave heartbroken,
Mm.
or I would watch my friends get pregnant and I was like, I don't want to be jealous, I don't want to be envy my best friend, like I should be excited for her. And like
Yeah.
instead I was feeling all of these different emotions that were part of that
Mm.
journey, especially because it was such a long journey.
Yeah.
That we just did not anticipate. I was thinking like, okay, if we try again after a miscarriage, we're going to get pregnant right away.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was not our testimony. And,
Mm.
thank God it wasn't. But when
Yeah.
you're in the middle of it, it is
Ugh.
very, very hard to see what is happening.
Absolutely. 3 years is not a short amount of time to kind
Yeah,
of
no.
figure out and know, like, okay, do we keep trying? Do we reconsider that thought of adoption? Like, what is
Mhm.
the Lord trying to communicate?
Yeah.
So, obviously, you
Mhm.
guys had a baby.
Yeah.
She's turning 1.
Yes.
She's turning 1 or she just turned 1?
She's turning one.
Turning 1. Wow.
Yeah.
So fun. I'm sure it's gone so fast too. Like right before your eyes.
Yeah. The
So
3 years felt like 10, and the 1 year felt like 2 weeks.
you're like, that doesn't math out right. I don't
Oh.
understand. So you have a daughter,
Mhm.
and your daughter's life, just from talking with you, was one already. We know it's a miracle, just knowing the back history, but there was more story in her life. What was her story?
Yeah.
And how did that teach you about God's faithfulness in the midst of her life, of finding out you're pregnant, the development process, everything?
Yeah. Well, I'll share more about her story, but I do want to preface, I
Yeah.
swear my life is not all trauma. God has used every single thing in my life, and it is just so cool. And you'll hear the full circle. But we did have we had a hard time getting pregnant, and I know that's
Mm.
not, honestly, 3 years is a long time, but it's not even as long as people I know.
Yeah.
And so it's just a little glimmer of the struggle of what some people have to go through.
Yeah.
But for us, it was 3 years. We found out we were pregnant with our daughter, and I really wanted to do like the cute surprise for Dustin when I found out I was pregnant. And I instead ended up having a panic attack, which I did not expect to have at all. But I
Mm.
had a full blown panic attack because I was like, what if I'm testing too early?
Wow.
What if she's not going to make it? Like, and honestly, this is also a crazy thing because I knew it was a girl.
Mm.
I remember immediately just being like, she's not going to make it. And I was like, where did she come from?
Wow.
Like, we
Wow.
don't even know that it's a girl yet. And so anyways, I just kept referring to her maybe as a girl the whole time. And Dustin came home, and he
Mm.
was not supposed to come home for a few hours. He came home. I was in the middle of this panic attack. He was like, what's going on? I was like, I'm pregnant. And so like poor guy didn't even get like this cute experience.
Wow.
Just his wife
Yeah.
in a full blown panic attack. And
Real life. Real life.
yeah, really.
Ugh.
And we got to our first appointment. Everything looked great. And so we were just living on cloud nine. And then because of our story and the doctors knowing we were trying, and because of our former miscarriage, like we were already considered at risk.
Mm.
Um, and so they had pre-set up all of our appointments after they did the first one. So we had an appointment every single week. And it was just to make sure that everything looked good, nothing went wrong. We got to our 20-week appointment, and my daughter had valimentous cord insertion,
Mm.
which happens to 1% of pregnant ladies. And usually it only happens to people who go through IVF or people who have twins. It's like more
Mm.
likely in those circumstances. But there is no cause, there is no cure. It
Mm.
is when the cord of the placenta to the baby detaches on either side. Um, and so our doctors canceled. We went from having a one appointment every week to our 20-week appointment, finding out this diagnosis. Our doctors canceled our appointments for 5 weeks after that. And they were
Mm.
like, we don't know if she'll make it. So in
Wow.
5 weeks, we'll check again. But there's nothing we can do in the meantime. So we don't want to like stress you out, have you come in every week and not really know what's going on. Which to me, still as a mom, I don't really understand that. I think I
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
like, no, we should have gone every single week.
Yeah.
Um, but she made it the 5 weeks,
Mm.
and then we started doing appointments twice a week, every week until she was born. And they took her out early because she stopped growing. And when she came out, the doctors looked at the placenta and they were like, she shouldn't be here.
Wow.
And I was like, just give me my baby. I was like, please.
I just want to see her.
Yeah, I was like,
Yes.
don't say that. And as I was holding her, and my husband actually helped deliver her, and so he got to be the first
Mm.
one to technically hold her.
Wow.
He'd like everybody to know that.
Yeah.
Um,
It's like,
but
don't forget to mention
yeah,
that.
yeah. But we both agreed that like when we first held her, it was such a tangible reminder of God's incredible faithfulness.
Mm.
We my daughter is just a living testimony of God's provision. We didn't
Wow.
understand anything we were going through. We had struggles to we obviously had our miscarriage, then we had struggles to get pregnant again. Then we get pregnant. We have this traumatic pregnancy. We had a pretty traumatic birth. And I just think both of us were like, why does this keep happening to us? Why
Yeah.
us? But now every time we look at her, it's like this simple reminder that God is always doing something. And I could give a cliche answer and be like, God is always good. And he is. And there's biblical truth to that. But God's goodness doesn't always feel good in the moment. And I think especially everything we went through, and being good to me though just meant he was present and he was stable,
Wow.
and that made all the difference. And I think coming from the upbringing that I had, where consistency was all I ever wanted and desired,
Yeah.
I think the way that he used our daughter and the way that he used our journey just
Mm.
showed that. It was almost like him being like, all of these things are going to happen, and I'm going to be here through the whole thing so that you
Wow.
know I will never leave.
Wow.
And that's the faith I hold on to. That's the faithfulness I remind myself of, especially on the
Yeah.
hard days. Because, like I said, it is easy to say God is always good, and He is. But it is a lot harder when you are in the weeds or you
Yeah.
are in the fire. And
Yeah.
we just have to continuously remember that He's there too. And I think that's just a beautiful thing. And that's exactly what He did through our entire journey, was just
Mm.
continuously show up, even if I didn't want Him there, even if I was angry at him, he was always
Yeah.
like, I'm right here and we're doing
Mm.
it together. And so,
It's beautiful. I love it. It's like just tied your story with a bow right there. I'm like, wow, could I have done it better? Looking back at your whole story, your whole journey, faithfulness, God being faithful absolutely is a theme. What encouragement, as your final question, this podcast has been so good.
okay.
What would you encourage other girls that are listening to this? Maybe they resonated with some, with all, with different pieces, but this idea of God being faithful, they're walking through difficult things,
Mhm.
hardships, questions about God. How would you encourage to any of those girls listening?
Yeah, I think I wish there was a tangible tool where I could
Yeah.
be like, go do this.
Right.
But I never found that for myself. I
Yeah.
think the biggest encouragement I can give is to continuously seek out the freedom
Mm.
that Jesus offers. I
Yeah.
think the enemy just uses all of these circumstances, all of these situations to be chains in our life and to hold
Yeah.
us back. And I think God, God's holding the key, and he's just waiting for you to look at him and
Mm.
say, let me unlock it. Let me let you free.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you're not going to cry. That doesn't mean that you're not going to yell at him. That doesn't mean that you're not going to fight with him. Um, I was just talking in middle school today, and I was telling them about John 15:15, where Jesus reminds us that he calls us friends.
Mm.
I think when we think of a good friendship, we think of raw and honest and
Yeah.
life giving. And Jesus wants that with us too. And I
Yeah.
think there is freedom to be found in the raw and honest truth and how you're feeling. And you don't have to come to him with the perfect put
Mm.
together prayer. You don't have to come to him with the perfect put together self. Nothing's too messy for him, and he is just waiting for you to invite him into it.
So good.
Yeah.
Brittany, you have been such a blessing. Seriously, there's so many incredible things that you brought up throughout this time, just getting to delve into your story. Thank you for your vulnerability, for being real. I know it's going to bless so many other girls as they're listening I mean, that's the whole purpose of starting this podcast is I crave for women that were older than me, women that were walking with me just to be, like you said, raw and authentic, just to tell me like, where have you struggled? How did you lean on the Lord? How did he walk you through that? Because so
Yeah.
often in life we go through and everything's fine, everything's good, and we're not really sharing the challenges or the struggles. And that's how we grow. That's how we become who we are, by being honest and real with each other. So thank you for just being obedient with your story, sharing the parts of your story that are even still scary, and the enemy can come and bring a lot of shame. It's going to help set other people free because of what the Holy Spirit has done in you and wants to do through others. So, girls, if you enjoyed this episode today, I encourage you share it with your circle of people, share it with a friend. Make sure that you are subscribed, following along. We have so many incredible guests on this season, ones just like Brittany. And so, if you like to, again, share it with someone in your life that you know could really benefit from hearing about the faithfulness of God. So, girls, we're so glad that you're here, and we will see you again soon.